All right, I think we can get started. Thank you all for being here. I'm Alicia Mall. I am the co-founder along with Steve of GivePact, and we're excited for our first Web3 101 featuring ChoiceDAO, Sahar, and Marcella from Crypto Mondays, and has a lot of experience in the philanthropy world. So to get started, we are going to go through the agenda. And
sorry, having a little bit of technical difficulty here with the music and stuff.
No problem. So yeah, we want to just go through the fundamentals of Web3 and then have a conversation with these two incredible leaders on this crisis we have right now, where we're limiting every day, creating, after the overturn of Roe v. Wade, women's access to abortion. And so how we can fundraise and activate. We have great examples through ChoiceDAO, and Marcella also has ideas for how we can support directly.
Everyone see my screen?
Looks good. All right, so our hosts and our special guests, let's get into the agenda. Intros, Web3 101, the interview, Q&A, community insights, and action items. Feel free to drop questions in throughout. You can chat me personally if you feel more comfortable, or just keep the conversation going for the community. On the next slide, again, we want to hear from you. Where are you located? What are you fighting for? If there's an organization that you're working for, you're passionate about, let us know. And give us your level of Web3 understanding so we can tailor the conversation to where you're at, and no problem if you're at 1, and great if you're at 10. So what is GivePact? What we're doing is building a crypto fundraising platform for nonprofits that funds a community DAO for social impact.
I think Alicia froze. I'll pick up where she left off. Can everyone hear me? Not, all right, great. Well, let's let you connect. So we're building, so GivePact, who are we? We're building a crypto fundraising platform for nonprofits that funds a community DAO for social impact. So Alicia and I launched this brand in February, and she's back. The thing that stuck out to us the most as we started speaking with nonprofits is that less than 0.1% of them are even set up to accept crypto donations. So we're building a crypto donation platform specifically around progressive topics like choice. And the twist on it is that we're committing 20% of our revenue to a nonprofit DAO that the users of our platform control. So we're building a shared treasury around progressive causes that the donors and nonprofits that use the platform can sort of submit proposals on using those funds for good. So we're scheduled to launch in the fall of 2022. If you want to sign up to the waitlist, just go to waitlist.givepact.io, and we'll keep you posted on getting your organization set up as we approach the fall. Alicia, anything you want to add there?
No, I forgot to say that if my internet goes out, just give me 1 minute. Thank you for taking over.
No problem.
So why does Web3 matter to you as nonprofits or nonprofit donors, board members, activists? We want, as people who have worked in the industry for 10 years, often we are last to adopt technology because of resources, capacity. It's just not the focus. But what we've learned is technology, it should be fundamental to accelerating your organization's cause. So we want you to be on the latest technology to help advance your mission and organizing for your social movements. Crypto donations grew 16 times in 2021. There's a lot of money in this space, a lot of individuals who have accumulated wealth quickly. A lot of them are millennials, and they want to give to do good in the world, not just because of the tax write-offs. The average crypto donation is 82 times that of cash. So again, tons of money, and they're giving quite more than the average cash donation. I think about like 10,000 to 100 for the cash. 10,000 in crypto versus 128. It can make a couple crypto donations can make a significant dent in your organization's bottom line. Crypto projects, as you might have seen, are actively looking for social impact partnerships. Oftentimes when you have a crisis like the war in Ukraine, you have people wanting to do a lot of good. There's a lot of different projects. Some are great, some are unknown. So really trying to be a space that we can do a lot of due diligence on where the money is going, that the organization is legitimate. These are things that are important, and a lot is happening in the space through NFT projects as well. And again, crypto donors, largely millennials, are looking for the right projects. They want to know that their money is going to a cause that's making a difference. These are some of the basics, I'd say, for why it should matter to you.
Cool. So before we get into like how crypto and Web3 are sort of in practice driving social impact, and before we get to our conversation with Sahar and Marcella about that, we wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same page in terms of some of the basics of Web3, which is why it's titled Web3 101 for nonprofits. So we want to go through some big picture trends, big picture terms and ideas in Web3 that will help lay the foundation for the conversation with Sahar and Marcella that's coming up in a few minutes. So number one, crypto is growing as quickly as the internet in 1998. So, we see, this is a trend that's not going to go away. It's a trend that's still very early, but there's a lot of upside potential and development still to come over the next decade. And I think, whether even if the price or the market cap of crypto goes up and down and is very volatile, a lot of, new emerging technology typically is in its life cycle. 1998, 1999, the internet, that was when there was the .com bubble, but companies like Amazon and stuff and Google came out of that. So what is Web3? And before I get to Web3, I think it'll be helpful to talk about what were Web 1 and Web 2. So Web 1 was the information economy. It was the sort of birth of the internet and sort of this global encyclopedia and access to information that we had almost overnight. It's things like the AOL homepage, the Yahoo homepage, being able to search on Google, the internet, the birth of browsers like Netscape and Internet Explorer, just this idea that you could access whatever information you wanted on demand. Web 2 was the platform economy. So now these platforms became more interactive. They became places where you didn't just consume content or search for information, you actually shared stuff back and built out social networks and social graphs, and got services like Uber, where you could like get a car on demand. Facebook, you're uploading content, you're building a social network. YouTube, you're uploading video. Sort of this, think social feed, think interactive apps, think platforms where it's not just purely digesting information, it's now interaction. And now Web3 comes along, and that is generally described as the ownership economy. When I think about Web3 personally, I think about digital ownership, and the idea that there are now provably scarce digital assets, which sounds like a mouthful. It sounds like a very theoretical thing, but I think for anyone who's like played a video game or owned an MP3 file or anything, I think the idea of owning something digital is not too much of a stretch. And the question is, if you own something digital, where do you want it to live? Who do you want to custody it? Do you want to custody that digital asset with Facebook? Or would you rather do it on an open protocol like Ethereum that no one person controls, and that you can trust that when you own that digital asset, no one can mess with it. It's provably scarce. You can prove that you own it and you're all good. So that's sort of the foundation. That idea of digital ownership is what sort of unlocks Web3 and the applications that we'll talk about. So why is Web3 important? Number one, Web3 platforms provide more open alternatives to big tech products. And so you can think about the difference between email as a protocol versus a Facebook profile. Email as a protocol is free, right? Like anyone can set up an email address. You can go to Google, you can go to Hotmail, you can go to Yahoo, whatever. And if worst case scenario, they all shut you down, you can spin up your own server at home and run your own email server, and it gets access to email, right? It's an open protocol that nobody controls, but anyone can interact with. Versus a Facebook profile, which is a profile you don't actually own. You set it up on the Facebook network, they could shut it down if they want. You can't really go anywhere else to create that profile, right? So it's an alternative that's a more open protocol approach versus one where it's a closed system like Facebook, where they have full control over the platform and can decide what they want to do with your data or your profile or anything else. Number two, users participate in the ownership and governance of the platforms. So this is a big difference as well. So with Web3, through token technology, typically users are able to participate in sometimes the rev share or at a minimum the governance of the platform. So the tokens represent a share of voice and participation in the value that's accrued in the network. And lastly, Web3 platforms prevent rent-seeking behavior, which is a fancy way of saying big tech companies can basically charge whatever they want because we need to use them. Whereas with Web3, the applications that are being built, there's a much more competitive atmosphere. So I use Apple versus OpenSea as an example. Apple, as you all know, probably most of you have an iPhone, they charge a 30% fee to the app developers on their platform whenever they sell something. So if they sell an app for $1, Apple takes a 30% cut, and there's nothing really the developers can do about it because they need to access Apple's audience. OpenSea, on the other hand, is a NFT marketplace you might have heard of. And OpenSea is really just a front-end user experience built on top of the Ethereum blockchain. And so OpenSea doesn't actually own the underlying assets that live on the Ethereum blockchain, which are the NFTs. They're just an interface to access it. So they don't own the inventory. They can't actually charge a lot of money in terms of trading fees. Because if they go to 5%, 10%, 20%, someone else can just build another marketplace that charges less. So this is really important because now much more of the value that's created online goes to the people that build and the users themselves, instead of sort of middlemen that take a cut from the transaction. So what enables Web3? Blockchains do. So you probably heard the word blockchain thrown around a lot. To put it simply, a blockchain is a decentralized ledger or a database that thousands of servers host and validate. So if you think of like an Amazon server, that's a single, that's controlled by a company. You spin up an Amazon server, you can host a website or an app or something like that. Whereas the Ethereum network, for example, is a decentralized database that anyone can use. Anyone can build on top of it. The transactions are recorded in blocks every minute or so. All the transactions are recorded as blocks on the blockchain. And then those are basically immutable. They can't be changed moving forward. And anyone can transact on it. So think of it as like an open database that's very transparent. You can always look up any of the transactions. It's immutable. So whatever data is stored on it is there forever. And it's permissionless. Anyone can use it without needing permission from a specific company like Amazon in that example. Bitcoin, you've probably heard of, was the first blockchain-based cryptocurrency. And then Ethereum was the first programmable blockchain that pioneered smart contracts. And so Ethereum is really where a lot of the building is happening in terms of apps and other tokens that you would think of when you think of crypto. So it's really important breakthrough there. So it's not a perfect system. There are a lot of trade-offs with Web3 models. One of the benefits is that there's better incentive alignment between users and shareholders. I talked earlier about, users of Web3 protocols typically are rewarded tokens for their participation in the platform, which have a monetary value. So there's incentive alignment between the users and the shareholders, the people who build the platform. It's super secure and reliable self-custody. So if you have your Bitcoin or Ethereum on a wallet, and you have it stored safely, no one can touch it. No exchange can take it from you, etc. Transparent and composable. All transactions are sort of, you can look them up, you can find them out, see what happened. A lot of the protocols interact with each other, again, in a permissionless way. And lastly, decentralized governance. So they're not controlled by centralized gatekeepers. They typically are, or there's governance around amongst all the token holders, so it's more democratic that way. There are some drawbacks. Number one is irreversible transactions. If you were to accidentally send your Bitcoin to a wallet that doesn't exist, it's gone forever, right? One of the drawbacks of decentralization is there's no customer service team you can call There's no bank you can call and say, hey, I wired money to the wrong account. Can you help me get it back? Like once it's gone, it's gone. And so you have to tread really carefully, and it can be a little scary in terms of that drawback. Number two, costly transaction fees, which a lot of people are trying to solve with different solutions. But the bottom line is, on Ethereum, for example, it can cost $5 to $25, $30 to do a transaction, whether that's sending a coin or whatever it is. And lastly, moderation and regulations is in progress. It's not there yet. There's a lot of ideas being flown around. There's some bipartisan support on what crypto regulation could look like. But at the end of the day, a lot of these networks are hard to moderate. There is, in some ways, it is really hard to prevent bad actors from coming on, which is why you probably hear a lot about scams in crypto. There is sometimes very little we can do about bad actors that come on and use deceptive tactics to trick people. A few more ideas about the core pillars of Web3 before we get into our Q&A. Number one is tokens. So these are basically, when you think about cryptocurrency, these are some of the things you might think of: Bitcoin, Ethereum, and one day our PAC token. These use cases can be a store of value. So for example, Bitcoin is often described as digital gold. It has a very finite amount of Bitcoin will ever be created. And people see it as an inflation hedge or a store of value that, again, is decentralized and permissionless, and they self-custody it like they would a gold brick or something like that. Second use case is a currency. So people, for example, with Ethereum, they buy NFTs with it. They can buy other tokens on the Ethereum network with it. There are stable coins that are pegged to the US dollar that people use to buy things. Third is governance. We talked about this earlier, just the ability to vote on the direction of the network in terms of big decisions. And lastly, revenue share. So in some cases, people who own the token can participate in the revenue share of the protocol. So for example, if you own Looks token, which is another NFT marketplace, and you stake it, you get some of the Ethereum that is generated from transaction fees. And just the caveat, that this is one of the more controversial areas where the SEC looks at revenue share as a feature of a security, which is why you see a lot of debate around are token securities or not. In general, when they offer rev share, that's typically described as a feature of a security. Non-fungible tokens took off last year. Basically, NFTs are like tokens, but they're unique. They're one of ones. And so there's a couple of examples here. CryptoPunk is a very popular collection. Computer Cowgirls is one that published recently where the proceeds of buying those NFTs went to reproductive rights causes. But we're seeing a lot of emerging use cases for them. So the creator economy, we're seeing artists getting paid for their work, which is really amazing. We're seeing a lot of collectibles and things launching. A lot of community and membership businesses are popping up where you need to own the NFT to participate in whatever the creator's outputting or participate in the group chat or whatever sort of value that community is bringing. Gaming, so if you play video games, you might earn a certain item in the game, and now if it's an NFT, you can sell it on a marketplace, so it unlocks a lot of value for gamers. And lastly, a more speculative use case that hasn't come about yet is proving on-chain ownership of physical assets. I think a lot of people see things like ticketing and real estate deeds and insurance licenses sort of moving on, becoming NFTs, being sort of provably defined and living on the blockchain. Lastly, DAOs, which we're going to talk a lot about today, especially because we have ChoiceDAO on, and of course, GivePact. We're going to be launching a DAO as well. DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations. You can think of them as digital co-ops or groups of online communities that have a shared treasury or bank account. So number one use case is basically an alternative to a traditional LLC or corporation. People that want to have a flatter hierarchy. People where, typically to join a DAO, you have to own some sort of token. So everyone sort of has an incentive alignment. And so it's a more sort of decentralized way of running a business. Number two, we're seeing a lot of venture capital and investing moving this way. There's something called VC3 DAO that has 150 VCs that all put in a little bit of money each, and they all vote together on what startups to invest in. And lastly, and most importantly, for the sake of this call, is social impact. We'll talk, we'll dive in with Sahar about ChoiceDAO and how and why the DAO model works really well for it. Just a few examples we'll run through to sort of put this stuff into perspective. Art Blocks is a really popular art platform, and they basically publish NFTs as art as NFTs. They've raised over $23 million for different nonprofits. Every artist that publishes a collection on Art Blocks is able to choose a nonprofit that a percentage of their revenue goes to. So for most profits, artists donate 10 to 25% of the total sales to a charitable organization. So it's a really great look for the organizations that get selected. Woman Rise is a collection we really like. It's basically a collection of 10,000 randomly generated profile pictures by artist Maliha Abidi. 7.5% of the sales from this collection went to organizations like the Malala Fund, Girl Effect, the PAD Project, and SOLA Afghanistan. So it's a community of people that really care about women's issues, women's education, and just a community and collection that we love. And lastly, New Story. They build houses in Mexico and El Salvador, and they launched an NFT collection where for every piece of art, in this example, this house that was purchased, that built a house for someone that they can live in forever. So another example of how this NFT fundraising can be really effective for nonprofits, where you're giving donors a piece of art in exchange for funds that will drive your mission. So our big thesis for Web3 and why we're optimistic about it and why we think it vibes so well with social impact is that these decentralized networks are enabling new organizational models that are more equitable and accessible. At a high level, how can your nonprofit thinking about approaching Web3? Number one is to learn. Join calls like this. We got the Give Pack newsletter and wiki, which has a ton of amazing info. If you haven't read the New York Times Latecomer's Guide to Crypto, it's an amazing resource. And Discord, which is a platform that I really only started using when I got into crypto stuff and NFTs. It has a wealth of information. Sometimes it's drinking from a fire hose, but there's a ton of great spaces. ChoiceDAO is a Discord, for example, which I highly recommend everyone join. Number two is partner. So that's getting the basic donation infrastructure in place. We hope you use GivePack when we launch, but there are others that you can use now, like Endowment, to get set up. Number two, research the landscape, understand what NFT projects are out there, what DAOs are out there that might align with your values that you can reach out to partner with, and make that outreach systematic. Think about this as as you build out your outreach from just major foundations, federal and state grants, major donors. Add the crypto vertical to that systematic outreach that you're doing once you get a grip on the landscape. And lastly, the most difficult, but probably the most fruitful is launch. Staff your organization with a Web3 lead or contract with an agency that can help you, and look into launching a collection like New Story did, that's going to just raise direct funds for your organization, or setting up a sub DAO to help cultivate sort of Gen Z and millennial donors into your mission. So with that, please drop questions in the chat. I know it's hard to go through a Web3 stuff so quickly, and there's a lot to chew on. But if you have Web3 specific questions in the chat, drop them in and I'll try and answer them. For now, I'm going to pass over to Alicia and the rest of the team to take over.
Thanks, Steve. And yeah, I hope, Dory, you said you were at a 1. Did we get you to a 2? I know it's a lot, but certainly there's no, it takes a lot of learning and practice and reading. But we hope that at least got you thinking and asking questions. So as you know, we want to focus the next half of this space to talk about reproductive rights. We got the leak from the Supreme Court 2 months before. We didn't want to believe it, but people like Sahar went into action and said, women are going to have a hard time getting access to abortion. Could this be true? And she started organizing right away. What this looks like right now, for those who are not caught up to speed, 15 million women currently live in a state with an abortion ban, without access to abortion, meaning that they have to go to a state nearby. This soon could be half of the US could soon be without abortion. 12 states have banned abortion at 6 weeks or earlier. Sorry, these slides are messed up. And this is again for life-threatening situations. We're still making it super, super hard and illegal in some states. And this means that there's now a surge in states that do allow abortion, and they're at capacity and need increased support. So it's not just about getting support to the women in states that don't have abortion, but it's supporting the states that do, because they're at they're working at an exhaustive pace and cannot support that. So those are some of the basic facts that I've learned. I'm sure some of you, we have MSI here, and they work to provide abortions in developing countries to women. So it's interesting to have you all and folks that work in the US. But all in all, we're fighting for healthcare at a basic level for women. So now let's introduce our incredible speakers. Sahar, who I don't know if anybody uses Superhuman, but Superhuman, for anyone who has an email that looks as horrendous as mine, they are trying to use, they're making it easier to manage your email. Steve told me about that. They have an incredible team of onboarders and specialists who help you use the product. And Sahar was a product manager for this company that we encourage you to look into. And as I said, 2 months before, when we got the leak from the Supreme Court that they would overturn Roe v. Wade, Sahar jumped into action to do something new. She's not from the crypto space. So we want to hear about, why would you think it would be a good idea to raise $1 million in Ethereum for reproductive rights? And then Marcella Cage, who's had a career of service. She has worked at organizations that provide support for those who are homeless, and then transitioned to do healthcare, and now specifically in reproductive rights. So we have 2 experts. And Marcella also is super cool in that she straddles the traditional world of philanthropy through the Packard Foundation, and now is doing Crypto Mondays, which she'll tell us, we'll go into more. But super cool to have you all with us in our inaugural Web3 101.
Thank you. We're really happy to be here.
And I think on the next slide, just a little bit more about the projects. So ChoiceDAO, you guys launched in response to Roe v. Wade being overturned. Your goal is to raise $1 million in crypto for reproductive justice. You have incredible leaders on your advisory board, including Cecile Richards, who most of you know led Planned Parenthood for a long time, and Reshma Saujani. I think I volunteered for her campaign for public advocate or whatnot. She's also the founder of Girls Who Code, a wonderful project that's providing opportunities for women, young girls, to get involved in web development. And then Web and Crypto Mondays, specifically the San Francisco chapter, they are the world's largest community focused on Web3 live events. If you can imagine, they happen on Mondays. They have 30,000 members across 65 cities. So let's chat. If we can get rid of the presentation and show your beautiful faces. Yes, Essex Moore actually told me about Crypto Mondays. So when I knew that Marcella came from there, I was familiar. So let's start with you, Sahar. Why would you think in 2 months you could get a project going in one of the toughest industries for one of the most needy causes, reproductive rights?
Yeah, this, like you said, we started a few months ago when the decision to overturn Roe was first leaked. And I got together with Reshma, the woman who started Girls Who Code, and we were looking at the repro rights space and seeing 2 big problems. One, historically, the space and the work in the space has been very underfunded, and the funding from big donors has come from people you can count on one hand. And so our question was, what happens when those funds dry up? We also need new money, new sources of funding. And the second is that this is a decade-long fight. So right now, the crypto market is not the best place to be fundraising because it's down. And if we were to just do a pure fundraise, we probably would have done it using Web2 resources. But what we see in Web3 is the power of community and the power of engaging this geo-agnostic, decentralized group of people that share the mission in support of reproductive rights. So we were wondering, how can we infuse new ideas and mobilize this upcoming generation of activists to carry the torch forward? And then our answer was Web3. We think it has the keys to strengthen social movements, even beyond reproductive rights. It's a new source for funds, and it lets us tap into a global community quickly. I think the keywords are speed and scale. You can reach more people faster than ever historically thought possible, and they're all over the world. And people are, in crisis all over the country because of this decision. It's really, really devastating. Many of us are outraged and we want to get involved, but we're not sure what to do. It's true that you can donate, you can vote, you can tweet, and you should do all of those things. But the current system leaves a lot of us questioning the impact of those actions. We feel left out of the process. And so enter this DAO model. What it does is it incentivizes participation. So when you contribute, you get back governance tokens, which enable you to vote on what the project does. This gives you voice, and this gives you power to you if you care about the mission and you want to engage in the work. So we see it as an on-ramp to participation in the issue. And it scales really quickly. Let's say you can mobilize 1,000 people, and you can effectively leverage 1 hour a week from everyone. It's not an easy task, but at 1,000 hours a week, doing something sort of effectively, you can inject a lot of energy and inertia and forwards into the work that's already on the ground. So ChoiceDAO's goal is to be more than just a fundraiser. We want to be an innovation hub for activists who are working to supercharge the efforts of frontline organizations and other activists already on the grounds. And we want to make it really easy to bridge people who want to participate with people who need more help. And so that's why we started the project. I think that's why it's so important to explore this Web3 model. And already we've been able to do things like onboard big nonprofits in the Repro rights space to set up crypto wallets, which is going to be a new source of runway for them even beyond our project. And we have almost, I think 600 or so members who are all invested in building tools to support folks on the ground. So I think the potential here is uncapped, and we need to start now. We can't wait for the market to get better because this is an issue that is hurting a lot of people right now.
We hear that. We cannot, everyone's upset that the market's down and all this stuff, but who does the market hurt? You lost $1 million, or did you lose a meal? Did you lose your house? Let's put this into perspective. So Sahar, what got you in, was there a DAO community? What was your pathway into learning about this world?
Yeah, so I had worked in software companies before in product and early stage tech. And I left my job at Superhuman to think about what do I want to do next. And I was really interested in the question, what does the future of community look like outside of social impact? So I started doing a lot of exploration into Web3 and DAOs. And specifically in the DAO tooling space, how do you empower these new communities to start to flourish? And there's a lot of challenges. DAOs have only been around for a few years. They're very nascent, but they've evolved to become the sort of de facto crypto startup. So if you're starting a new project, you're likely starting some sort of DAO. You still need legal entity backing you. So it's not a replacement for an LLC, but it is the kind of model for crypto businesses in the future. There's a lot of legal challenges, especially with 501c3 status, to get solved before we were able to open for contributions. So I think there's a lot of power and potential in the DAO model, but there is also a lot of work and innovation needed to be made to make it sustainable in the future. And so that was the draw for me. It was there's a lot of hard problems here, but this is really, really interesting as a way to think about what the future of community looks like. And then this issue is really the seed for me to do something more actively and start a project. A lot of anger behind the action.
That's awesome. Marcella, tell us about you. How did you, after working at the Packard Foundation, nonprofits, traditional fundraising, what sparked your interest in Web3?
So I bought crypto in 2018 and sat on it, right? And it wasn't really until last year where things got hotter and people were asking me, how do I get in, So I started a spreadsheet and I would just send my friends there, and I created a Twitter for them. I was I hate answering the same question over and over, go look at this. And then I started realizing there's so much potential here in this space, right? I come from traditional philanthropy, and we give our money in, fiat. But recently I had an abortion fund I was on a call with who said, listen, there are people who want to donate to us, but they're afraid right now because there's a lot of uncertainty with the laws, right? If they donate to a fund, could they find themselves in court for donating to something that could be seen as illegal? She said that, people are asking, can we donate in crypto? How do I get started? And I was like, boy, do I know the right people to put you in touch with. But I think, the current climate, you're seeing a lot more people who are seeking anonymity in their donations. And so it's definitely the right time to start looking into the potential for crypto donations and Web3 for nonprofit organizations.
And so how did you all meet?
So funny enough, I met Sonia. Sonia is one of the founders of getchange.io. She was speaking at an event about NFTs. And a few weeks later, I was reading an article for work about abortions and how, they may be funded through crypto donations in the future. And I saw Sonia's name pop up and I was like, I know you. So I reached out to her and I was like, hey, just saw your name in this article. Let's grab coffee this Friday and chat. And she was like, sure, I would love to. Friday rolls around in the morning, we get the news that Roe was overturned. And I was like, wow, that is divine timing. So we met and we immediately started talking about how I could get involved with ChoiceDAO. And then through her, I met Sahar, who's an absolute powerhouse. She is seriously the most efficient person I've ever met in my life. She's amazing. Her knowledge is just, she knows everything and she's a definite go-getter. And she was able to get our DAO up and running in just a matter of a few weeks with all of the legal documents and things in place, and while still building a community at the same time. Just incredible. It's been great to work alongside her.
So for both of you, what do you think is the most compelling way to have a conversation with someone in the nonprofit world about exploring crypto?
It was already said in the beginning about the organization that builds houses, and they were able to sell NFTs for 2 ETH, which would cover the cost of a house. I think that's so powerful. You're selling NFTs and in return, you are getting something or doing something for someone else, right? And then you have an NFT, you could use it, you could post it on Twitter, you could flex it, whatever. And so you show, you're part of this thing that's larger. It's a sense of community. It's a sense of you're doing something good and you're alongside others who are. And I thought that was really powerful. And also just this piece of being able to stay anonymous as well if you choose to donate to like an abortion fund. And also, looking into the tax write-offs as well. If you give in crypto, you won't have to pay capital gains tax, which would be, enticing to get donors into the space.
Yeah, I would say to add on to that too, especially in Repro Rights, the anonymity component is important. So Marcella had mentioned to me in conversation that some of the organizations were getting requests for more anonymous methods of donating because it's a sensitive topic. They want to protect their identity. And so crypto is a good way to do that. Also, I think a couple other benefits is more transparency around funds coming in and funds going out. So everything's on a public ledger. You can see exactly where it's being utilized. You can annotate it and share that with people who contributed. And then for Repro Rights right now, especially with the legality changing so rapidly, the government can't lock up the money easily. And so we see a lot of people that say, I want to donate, I want it to be impactful, so I'm going to go local and I'm going to donate to, say, like a Texas clinic. The problem is that the Texas laws are changing so fast that clinic may not be in operation or may not be legally allowed to operate. And so putting it into this sort of like funds of fund model, where we are in partnership with experts like Cecile, like Marcella, who can inform where to go with the money. And a lot of people want to donate, but they don't want to do the research to understand where the best vehicles for donation are, to say, hey, like we can take this and facilitate effective and impactful work with this money is another draw. And then I guess the other piece is like money, like organizations need more money. And if they're seeing that like Girls Who Code raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think each quarter in cryptocurrency. And so if you see that type of volume, it's a real incentive to say, okay, we should offer that as well. And it takes some setup, but it's not overly heavy-handed. And we have partners with ChoiceDAO like Change and the Giving Block to make that on-ramp really smooth.
So say more about, the approach, where do you see the million going? How long is it going to take to raise it? And how are you going to allocate it?
Yeah, I don't know how long it'll take to raise it. We got like almost 10K in the first 2 hours of launch, which was amazing. And that sort of tapered off after launch. Probably to get to 1 million, we'll need to partner with foundations and other organizations that are in support of the mission, like crypto networks and layer ones all have really big foundations that are really well funded with charitable arms to donate to humanitarian efforts like this. Though we don't need to wait until we get to 1 million to start deploying money. We can do it as soon as now. And as far as how we see that going, I think there are 2 paths and we can do a blend of both. One is directly to frontline nonprofits, smaller localized organizations in surge states like Marcella was mentioning, where they're really overwhelmed right now. To just enable them to keep doing what they're doing. And then there's more education and awareness that's more community driven. So Marcella hosted an amazing event with Crypto Mondays and SF that was like 60 people to educate them on like, what is Roe v. Wade and what are the implications of this and why should we still care about it and keep caring about it? It goes way beyond abortion access. And so there's a lot that like the community can do and organize in local pockets or virtual events to spread awareness and education on the topic, which I think will be really important. As well as like there's, for example, a film called The Janes that I was talking to you guys about earlier. It's about these abortion activists pre-Roe v. Wade, and they went and facilitated this underground network to give people access to care pre-Roe v. Wade. They were going to go to jail, and then Roe v. Wade was brought into place, and then that case was dropped. But anyway, their filmmakers are going on a tour around the country to educate people on the topic, do screenings, and talk about voter activation. We can give them resources. So they need a designer for their website. We have amazing designers and web engineers that we can support their work with, or we can meet them at the event and help them coordinate or pay for food, draw people in and education and all that sort of thing. So there's a lot of different ways that we can participate and make people feel like they're meaningfully contributing. And now that we have donations set up, that's the next kind of big question for us to figure out.
And Marcella, say more about the needs. So we've gone over surge states that have that are spaces to allow abortion. They need support. We know we need to get women the basic resources to go from location A to B to get treatment and maybe hotel stay, food, travel. Talk more about the needs, the emergency needs right now, and how we can get plugged in.
Yeah, just to put everything into perspective, the southernmost state with abortion access protection is Maryland. And if you look on a map, that's not southern at all, but that tells you a lot. And so Maryland is going to be seen as a surge state. Right now, Maryland only has one abortion fund, and they're going to need help, right? And so I think that it's important to start considering donating to organizations or donating to places that are helping build the capacity in surge states. And it doesn't just affect women, there's trans people, there are, everybody is going to be impacted by the overturn of Roe versus Wade somehow. Another thing that really put things into perspective for me is that in the South, there was Mississippi, which had one abortion clinic. And when that closed, now the closest abortion clinic round trip will be about 1,000 miles. And, the majority of people who have abortions actually already have children, right? So you have to think about, where are your children going to go? Well, you're driving 1,000 miles round trip, right? How are you going to pay for food? How are you going to pay for gas? These are all things that are really important when you're thinking about how we're going to allow access to people who are seeking abortions.
Yes.
I think for me, like where to put funds right now, the 2 places that I really love are abortion funds. I think that they are doing great work. There's NNAF, National Network of Abortion Funds, and just funding clinics in surge states.
Steve, I want to get you in the conversation here. And where are the men? Where are the men in this conversation? You know, thank you, Nat, for being here. But why don't men think of this as their problem? And I think it'll be interesting for ChoiceDAO. Crypto is a unfortunately male dominated space. I will say it's disproportionately Latino and Black, which I'm proud to say because I'm both Latino and Black. I think it provides access to capital to us in ways that the traditional banking system doesn't. But let's talk about, Steve, how do we get men to care about abortion and how do we get to the million?
That's a really tough question. Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many, I would say, like, from my perspective, I mean, you know, I often try and think of like, how can you sort of tap into like people's selfish motivations and to get them on board with what your cause is. I don't know if it's like an inner politician in me or something, but like, I know it's not necessarily always the like most moral way to go, but like I think there is some values that I think crypto, you mentioned like all the crypto bros could probably align with, and that's like things around like when you think about self-custody of your digital assets, like you should also have, you know, control over your body and what happens to your body, right? And like that's the most important asset that any of us will ever own in our life is like, you know, is ourselves. So I think from that perspective, I think the things that I think about are like, you know, how can you sort of tap into maybe some of the values that these crypto folks have that resonate with them, that sort of align with the mission of sort of self-sovereignty and like deciding for yourself what happens, you know, to your own body. And so I think I see some alignment there, which I think could be a vein that I think from sort of like a, you know, sort of not, I want to say like propaganda, but like sort of a rhetoric perspective that might work and get a lot more people on board. I don't know if that checks out with you, Sahar. Or
Yeah. I have the same questions. We took a lot of care in our messaging up front because we wanted to cast a wide net. Like, let's establish a baseline that everyone can opt into. Everyone agrees, you know, need choice in your life, whether it's what you eat, where you live, control of your body is a prerequisite to freedom. And we as Americans and around the world believe in freedom and value that. And so this was a top-down decision by the government that obstructs freedom. And most people, I haven't met anyone that disagrees with that. When you start getting into the nuances of the topic, unfortunately, that's where people start to fork off and have these really emotional opinions about what is life, what is gender, like all of these things. And so we wanted to start by like, let's bring everyone in the room by casting this wide net, and then we can have safe conversations from there. And what we've seen with that, and that's also why we chose the Liberty icon as our imagery versus like an angry uterus, which we are angry and we are angry uteruses, but that doesn't, people like that can't get abortions won't self-identify with that, but they do care about the issue. And so what we've seen is most of our community is women or non-binary people, but almost half are men. And that's really exciting because yes, over 90% of the wealth in crypto is held by men. And they do care. I think there's a question of, is it not, I don't want to speak out, but is it my place to speak out? Do I feel comfortable speaking out on an issue that's historically been positioned as exclusively women? Is it my place? Should I hand the mic to a woman? And I think that's the wrong approach, but unfortunately that's the space that we've put them in some of the ways that we've had the dialogue. And so thinking about, I was talking to a TikTok influencer of doing like a man-to-man campaign where we have men kind of take the mic and explain like, this is why it matters, this is why I care, and giving them some space to talk about it, because we've been hearing like, yes, I care. It's two things. I care, but I don't think I should speak out. And I care, but the organization that I'm affiliated with is against getting involved in politics. And unfortunately, this has been effectively weaponized topic for politicians and for the right and the left. And so people feel like by speaking out and taking a stance on a human rights issue, they're also picking a political party. And crypto is very like, it's got these very like libertarian values.
And I just want to jump in to say that I agree, like the argument of choice, right? And that it takes away your right to choose has been so strong. But in addition to that, one of the things when I'm talking to people who don't know much about Roe versus Wade is sharing real stories, right? So before I was in the repro space, I volunteered for over 10 years with this organization that helps alleviate poverty and homelessness in San Jose. And one of the ladies I was talking with when we were distributing blankets and food, you know, she was telling me that she sleeps in a tent and she's woken up with men inside her. And if you think about that, that's not a choice, right? And so if this person becomes pregnant, do you think that this is her, you know, should she carry on? But it goes beyond that, right? I mean, there are couples who have tried desperately to conceive and need abortions because either the fetus is not viable or it's an ectopic pregnancy. There's so many different reasons, right? And this is something that will affect everyone, right? Especially if you're talking to a man, right? Who maybe is planning on getting married one day and wants to conceive. You think about it, you think, what if your wife conceives and it's an ectopic pregnancy and they can't perform a procedure? And so, you know, like her fallopian tube bursts and she bleeds out. Think about that, right? It's the right to access.
That's right, the right to access. And we're coming up on 2 o'clock. SX Noir has asked, and if you have any questions, this is the time to ask our panelists. She's read that crypto can be the underground railroad for abortion access. How do you feel about this?
I support that. For the project itself, though, we are a legal entity with 501c3 status. And so we need to operate with our funding in legal ways, which is constantly changing. And Marcella can talk a bit about like how they've seen that change their ability to give grants too. But I also fully support people going rogue. There is a woman, a project called Women on Waves, where this woman traveled around on a ship giving abortion access to people with no legal alternatives. And that was really cool because she's getting creative and kind of skirting the traditional laws through international waters. And there's a movie that I would suggest watching about her project. So I think we should look for ways to creatively fund and get around the legal restrictions and regressions.
The same person who started Women on Waves is now doing aid access. And what it is you can order abortion pills online and they get mailed to you, which I think is really cool. And I think that that's also the future as well, because they can't tamper your mail. They can't go through your mail and see like, oh, what are you ordering? Because that's illegal. But also I understand if you're living in a state where abortion is completely banned, you might be afraid of doing that nonetheless. But there's nothing to prevent somebody from sending an individual crypto that might go toward, you know, them seeking an abortion, right? I mean, it can be used that way. And I think that this space is constantly evolving. And just this morning, I read that this guy created a business card. It has enough of a drug to induce an abortion. It has like 3 doses of this abortion-inducing drug on the business card, which is cool. You're just seeing this space constantly evolve and change, and we're getting more creative because no matter if abortion's legal or illegal, they're still going to happen one way or another. So we might as well make them safe.
We'll take one more question before we wrap up.
Feel free to unmute and just pop in too.
All right, well, let's close out. Thank you so much, Marcella and Sahar. Really, really cool. When ChoiceDAO popped up, I was like, wow, this is a really exciting project. And we want to do everything we can at GivePack to support the movement. GivePack, we have over 50 organizations on our wait list. We'd love to have more reproductive rights organizations on. So I'll follow up with Sahar and Marcella. We want you to join us. For the follow up, we'll send you the recording, the key articles, how to get involved, more info from our guests, and the survey. Anything, Marcella and Sahar, you want to ask of the community?
Yeah, we have, you can join our Discord through our Twitter page, which is at the ChoiceDAO. Also linked there is our website. If you're interested in contributing and getting involved, please do that. You can do so on our website at choicedao.org. And yeah, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want to get involved in the project. We'd love to have you.
Thank you. And